India is committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2070. What does this really mean? How will we achieve it while at the same time ensuring that we achieve a level of development that we need for our citizens and given in the state that India is in as a developing economy? Well, to talk more about this, I'm joined by a panel. I can't think of better people to talk us through this. Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, Ulka Kelkar, Executive Director, Climate Program, World Resources Institute India, Harjeet Singh, Global Engagement Director, Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, and Mr. Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator in India here. Thank you so much all for joining us for this conclave, for this session. And Dr. Dhawan, I'd really like to start with you because when we talk about India's goal of net zero emissions, if you could explain to the viewers, to the audience, what does this really mean? What does it entail?
Well, I'm sure all of you are aware of net zero and the importance that why in the globe it should move towards net zero. Now we all blame that what is the reason, what is happening around us. If we look at Delhi, 50 degrees centigrade temperatures for over 1.5 months, you're talking of rains, never this kind of rains we have experienced, and all over the country, or I'll say globally, it is happening, it's the extremes, whether it is in terms of temperature, precipitation, and so on. Now, all to quite an extent, we can put this to the rising levels of emissions, GHG emissions, and which is resulting in increase in temperature or these extremities. Again, if we go back and we say, what is the reason? And we say industrialization, or the major reason is industrialization. And I'll say it's everything, whether it's the use of electricity, energy by each one of us, whether we are talking in terms of use of energy as in automobiles and so on. So everything results in emission. Now, let's also realize when we say net zero, it is that there are different ways of achieving that. First of all, none of the activities can be zero carbon dioxide generation or GHG emissions. We are looking towards efficiency increase so that you get efficiencies. The other is that whatever emissions are there, can we take care of those? And that is where we talk about nature-based solution. Net is, you'll still emit carbon dioxide, GHG emissions are going to be there, but can you take care of those emissions by other things, like whether it is carbon capture, carbon storage, whether it is planting more trees and other activities. So on one hand, we are trying to achieve energy efficiency, reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and the other is even then whatever emissions are, those should be absorbed. Because see, whatever we are observing today is with just 1.5 degrees increase in temperature, and whatever we have done so far will cost us at least 1.5 degrees. So in a way, you can say worst is still to come. And whatever actions we are taking today, it's also like it took many years for our bad deeds to express themselves. It's going to take a while for whatever we do good to express itself as well.
That's right. And bad deeds, when we talk about, developed countries are the ones that have contributed the most when it comes to the situation we find ourselves in today. But Ms. Kelkar, if you could tell us, what are the sectors of concern when we talk about emissions, and what can we do in those sectors? How can we lower those emissions?
Thank you. As Dr. Dhawan said, it's almost everything, the way we live, the way we work, the way we travel. It's all the sectors that contribute to carbon emissions. Electricity, transport, buildings, industry, agriculture, the way we use land. The good news is that in almost all of these things, we can change the way we make things or the way we travel and use cleaner fuels, different technologies, more efficient processes. It will take a change because we have become so used to doing certain kinds of things that it will take a lot of changes in the way we live, work, and travel. It will need a lot of new infrastructure to be built, especially for the growing country like ours. And it will also need a lot of behavioral and lifestyle changes by individuals. So it's actually quite a systemic change that
which
net
we've
zero
been talking
transformation
about during
requires.
this conclave. Yes.
Exactly. So good news is things are possible. Bad news is they will be tough, they will be expensive, and they will take time.
All right, Harjeet Singh, if you could tell us, what have we done so far? What has the government done now? It sounds very dire and daunting when we talk about net zero emissions, etc. But there's a lot that has been done. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Indian government has done a lot in terms of setting up the target of non-fossil fuel-based energy that's going to be there to the tune of 500 gigawatt by 2030. So largely 50% of our energy is going to come from non-fossil fuel sources. That's not a mean target. We know it's going to require a lot of effort. So given where we are right now, whether we talk about solar or wind, we need to be multiplying it by 3 to 4 times between now and 2030. And that's going to require hundreds of billions of dollars or even trillions to achieve that target. So that's one major thing that government is talking about. Of course, our energy efficiency target is also quite challenging and quite ambitious. Already the energy intensity reduction that we have seen, and that's quite promising. At the same time, we are also trying to increase our forest cover, which is going to absorb a lot of carbon. So overall, when it comes to climate target, it's looking pretty positive. What concerns us, and which is the overall environmental sustainability that we need to look at, which is the theme of your campaign. Yes. So how are we going to look at climate targets, of course, in light of energy security, but how we are going to do the environmental protection in a much more comprehensive sense, as we have a huge challenge of large population. We have to create jobs. We have to make sure that our economies grow. But at the same time, we also have to protect the environment, because if environment is not protected, we know the kind of disasters that we are already facing.
All right, well, taking from there, Mr. Shroff, if you could talk about this balancing that needs to be done. We are a developing economy. We have needs, for our citizens. But at the same time, we have these, lofty ambitions, and we're aiming for net zero by 2017. So how does one balance all this?
I think that you've put your finger on a really important point. And an issue that maybe wasn't really sufficiently talked about until after COP26, and for a very bad reason, which is the war in Ukraine. Following which, we saw high-income countries suddenly turning back towards some, dirtier energy sources. And the question came, well, why is that? We've all agreed to these targets, 2030, 2050. And the response was, well, we're facing a crisis, right? Our people have needs. The winter will be cold. They have to warm their homes. And the developing world, with India really at the forefront of climate justice for the global south, said, well, look, this is the issue that our people are facing each and every day, because they haven't yet enjoyed full development, right? So in India, 2/3 of the cities are yet to be built. So I think really, the world then, after COP26, sort of understood a bit differently. Wow, okay, we need to balance mitigation and adaptation. We need loss and damage funds. We need to, for the high-income world to really meet its obligation to provide financing and technology transfers to the developing world. So I think that India has lessons for the world in terms of applying technology and innovation and investing in renewable energy. At the same time, that needs to balance with the right to development, with 1 million young people entering the workforce each and every month as well.
All right. I'd like Dr. Dhawan also to speak on this issue of how do we balance our need for growth and development as well, and our need for energy, and then the targets that we have when it comes to emissions. What are the sectors that concern you the most, and where do you think we need to act first?
Well, I won't like to say that, we can't prioritize, first of all, because it is such a problem that we'll have to take care of every sector, and that is why the mission life becomes very important.
So that's where you agree with Ms. Kelkar here.
There are two things. Let's realize that climate change or emissions are caused by each one of us, and each one of us is getting impacted. It is the degree which varies. The point which you made, that it's the industrialized countries or industrialization that has led to climate change, and perhaps we are on the receiving end. I won't agree with you. And that is, no, yeah. What I want to say is, let's not blame. It is something like the best of the technologies which were available at that time. Those were followed by the developed part of the world, and we are also beneficiary to those developments. Now, what is happening is that those who have very less risk-taking capacity, and also the rise in temperature, the way it is impacting different countries differently. So we are one of the countries which is going to be negatively impacted due to the changing climate. There are few countries where it's also positive. But then we are going to be negatively impacted, and unfortunately, our people, they have very low risk-taking capacity. Because see, if there is a flood in New York, they'll evacuate you, they will save you, save the life, and even if their house gets totally demolished due to that flood, maybe it will be 1 or 2% of their income. But in our country, unfortunately, if someone loses their house, it's not insured, and it's everything gone. So it is maybe a generation or two who is going to suffer because of that. So our risk-taking capacity is very low. Now coming to that, yes, you are absolutely right, and very proudly today we say that per capita consumption in India is energy consumption in India is very low. Let's also look into it. Why? It is, first of all, energy accessibility. Now we say all villages are electrified, but how sure one is of the electricity supply? They don't get it for 24/7. The other is cost of electricity. So it is very expensive. So many people can't afford. But as our economic status is going to improve, they are going to consume more of energy. So overall energy demand is going to rise in this country, both population pressure as well as economic growth. Now, these are the challenges. Now, let me come to opportunities. In many countries, like even if we look at and you also asked another question, what are the sectors which are little difficult to abate? And I'll say steel and cement. And they are also required for infrastructure. And we say that 2/3 of the infrastructure in India is yet to be built. So there is going to be huge requirement of some of the stuff which is to be used in infrastructure development. Now also let's look at, we export steel as well. And it's not just India, it's China and many other countries as well. And they have huge infrastructure already in place. Opportunity for us is we still have to build the infrastructure. The government has taken adequate steps in terms of where are the new technologies like green hydrogen, which can be used in difficult to abate sector. India also has international biofuel mission. So we are in fact taking steps so that we will be ahead of many other countries. We don't have to break and construct. We have to construct for the first time. And whether it is buildings, whether it is building material, whether it is substitutes for cement production, steel production, we can actually go green and show the way to the world.
Mr. Singh, if you could talk about India's energy policies and when it comes to renewables, wind, solar, even nuclear now the government is talking about more. How can this help us achieve our net zero goal?
So overall, the policies that India is promoting, be it at the industrial level or at the individual level now, government is coming up big way on rooftop solar, which is going to power 1 crore homes, which is a massive initiative, which actually has been lagging behind if you look at the overall solar mission. The policies that are going to connect that with the smart grid process, that's going to be extremely helpful. So you can generate energy and actually connect it with the grid and get some money out of it. We also see the policies on EV, which are benefiting a lot. So people can buy electric cars and they also get subsidies and they also get a rebate on the registration part. So there are a number of policies that government has promoted on renewable energy, which is going to help people in a big way, and also incentivizing industries to move away from fossil fuels and adopt some of these options. Huge investment that's happening in hydrogen. Of course, we can't over-rely on it because it is still at a very nascent stage and there's a lot of research and technology that is happening, but that initiative has attracted 20,000 crore rupees, which is a massive amount of money that's going to be invested. So there are a number of initiatives that government has to promote, but let's also understand the challenge that we continue to remain dependent on coal in a big way. and as our energy needs are growing, in fact, the reality is that it's going to double by 2040. So we have a massive target for 2030, but as our energy needs are growing, our dependence on coal continues to also grow to the rate of more than 10% every year. So we need to find that balance. On one hand, it's great that we are promoting renewable energy and non-fossil fuel sources, but our dependence on coal and other fossil fuels also remains. So how are we going to make sure that when we talk about net zero, how do we achieve
Right.
that? And that's where it's not only India investing its own resources, we also need to find way of getting international finance to help India achieve that target in this journey of becoming net zero.
That's what Ms. Kelkar, if you can tell us about, communities, what are your concerns when we move away from fossil fuels, and we need our communities also to adapt to a new way of life, as we've been talking about, and in terms of jobs, in terms of development, if you could tell us about that.
Our research analysis shows that the net zero transition will be great for the economy on aggregate. It will create new jobs, it will build new infrastructure, it will bring in new green industries, it will bring in better health, in fact, by using cleaner fuels. But the details matter. Our country is very diverse, so there are regions which are highly fossil fuel dependent, which will not be able to transition so easily to renewable energy. Not just because they may find it harder to attract finance, but also because, for example, wind energy resources are concentrated on the west and south of the country, near the coast, and not so much in the east and north of the country. Then we also have to remember that our economy is still highly informal. I don't think there are many developed countries which have ever gone through this phase, even in their past, where 80% jobs were in the informal sector and had to be quickly transitioned to different technologies, different fuels, where the capital cost of new equipment, energy efficient improvements have to be borne up front. And the third is, of course, the role of women. Even if new jobs are created, we find that women's participation in the workforce needs to get special attention. So I think all of these details matter. And the question that you specifically, the word you used, communities, is very important because a lot needs to be done at the community scale. They are the best decision makers when it comes to the natural resources, the local economy, the local capabilities. But you can't leave it only to them. They need to be supported by government policies, by finance, and really this is where cooperation matters a lot.
Absolutely. Mr. Sharp, I'd like to, talk to you also about these communities, and I was, as we were talking about, renewables, and we talk about storage of the energy. I think another big concern all of us have are the batteries that are used for storing. It involves, because let's face it, that is not carbon neutral, that is not zero emission. It involves a lot of mining. There's also about how we're going to deal with the waste later. So those are some concerns, which I'm really hoping technology is going to advance and show us a better way forward. But yes, Mr. Sharp, when it comes to, our net zero goal and communities, your comments on that?
Well, I think that there's no doubt about it that green economy, green jobs, these are the best in every respect, right? So there's multiple sort of multipliers, let's say like that, right? So a green job not only is going to take advantage of skilling opportunities, it's 21st century skills related to that, but then you're not putting out emissions, you're not putting out particulates into the air, you're improving the health as well. And we also know that investing, the evidence is pretty clear that investing in green jobs, in the green economy, produces 3 times as many jobs. So that's very, very clear. It tends to be more a bit of a time lag and an investment challenge, right? So we need to unleash and unlock financing for green jobs. And this is, again, where India has put out really important leadership in the international stage. The Singh Summers report that came out of G20 was really calling for a reform of the multilateral, the MDBs, development banks. I know we had IFC here previously and others saying, we need $500 billion a year immediate injection of grant capital. And we need to, really crowd in $4 trillion a year in terms of additional lending and investments of different types. Now, once you bring that money into the market, you see the appetite here in India, for example, is absolutely massive in all these different sectors for renewable energy, for green jobs, and the emissions, green hydrogen and biofuels and all of these things. I would say India has 3 advantages. One is this demographic dividend, youth, the greatest youth generation in history, more young minds to tap for solutions than ever before. And we see a lot of young people here in the room. The gender dividend, unleashing the as of yet not fully tapped potential of women in the workforce, the labor in the workforce participation we need to bump up, and the innovation, technology and innovation. And that's why I do believe that, you know, the pace of change will be such that India also will bring down its net zero kind of goal, I do believe, in the coming years.
All right, well, on that optimistic note, I'll have to end this session here. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, a lot more to talk about this issue. We could discontinue, but a round of applause for the panelists. As you can see, it's a very daunting and ambitious target, but one that we all have to work together, be it individuals, corporates, or governments. Thank you so much.